The DOGE quest for government transparency and lifting up the rugs of cronyism is inspiring an international call to audit other countries' own governments and to see where the global gravy train is flowing. There's an emerging demand for all of this, especially in Europe. MTC Brussels, a conservative think tank, wants to take a look at the receipts of the EU's European Commission's cozy relationship with a host of NGOs. The report, compiled by MTC Brussels, accuses the EU of using European funds to create and keep afloat a propaganda network that pushes a globalist agenda. Here's some of the funding they uncovered. 250 million euros to the pro-EU news network Euronews over the last 10 years. $250 million to the Center for European Policy Studies, a think tank advocating for deeper EU integration. 15 million euros for the European Movement International, EMI, which specifically criticizes Hungary and their government. $250,000 to NGOs in Romania, Bulgaria, and Italy, including Freedom House Romania, for projects designed to counter Euroscepticism. Remember, an election was recently overturned in Romania. 1.2 million euros to the Union of European Federalists, which promotes a federal European state. The list goes on. Lots of money here, lots of causes. Is the EU in desperate need for their own DOGE? And is this key to actually fighting globalism? And if they do start enacting DOGE in this international capacity, what specific challenges do they face in the EU? Joining us now, Peter Schweizer, president of the Government and Accountability Institute. He's also co-host of a phenomenal podcast called The Drilldown. Peter, what a pleasure. Welcome back.
Great to be with you always, Chanel. Thanks for having me.
So I know we're hopping you over to a different continent entirely, though there's so much to talk about here on the United States side. But it's interesting because it gives us a blueprint for what the road bumps might be, the speed bumps might be with an effort like DOGE. Talk to us about what challenges you see in establishing a DOGE EU version across the pond.
Well, I think this is another example of how powerful ideas that are popular with ordinary people can transcend borders. I'm old enough to remember, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan leading the charge on deregulation. That spilled over into the rest of Europe. It spilled over into parts of Asia. And I think you're seeing the same thing here with DOGE. It's a very attractive notion. The idea, shock of all shocks, that we should actually know what our governments are spending money on is a very popular idea. So I'm glad it's going to be pushed in Europe. I think there's going to be a lot of resistance in Europe, as there is in the United States. But if there are electoral successes there among those who are more reform-minded parties in, say, Germany or in the UK or in France, it could actually become a reality. And, what you highlighted is one of the tangents of the problem, which is that these bureaucracies are funding NGOs not, to feed hungry people or to advance, a broadly agreed upon social agenda. It's to protect their own interests and to feather their own nests. And that's where it should begin, just like the DOGE investigation in the United States. But in Europe, they're going to face the same kind of resistance. So I hope they're up to it.
Well, I know you've done a lot of work into this in all your books and in the research that you put out at GAI, but the European contingent of, I guess, this class of oligarchs that exists nationwide, but they exist in the United States too. Europe is very important for them. Europe is a place where money is laundered in ways that they can't be laundered in the United States at a very high level and at a very large scale. If DOGE starts taking root over there, where do these oligarchs have to go?
Yeah, they probably have to go more to China, more to Russia, and some of these other autocratic societies. And look, the problem has always been, I wrote an entire book on this called Extortion. The problem has always been that, people want to think that the problem of corruption in government is a function of outside businesses or outside interests that are, sort of corrupting these fair-minded government officials. It's kind of this bribery model that we saw in the classic Jimmy Stewart movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The reality is otherwise. It's more like an extortion model. It's more like the mafia, when the mafia shows up at a corner grocery store in urban America and says, hey, you might want to take out insurance with us, because if you don't, your shop might actually burn down. Well, in this scenario, that's the government, and government officials in the United States and also in Europe threaten and pressure corporations, people that don't share their political views, and extort them for money or for silence. That's what's going on in the UK on free speech laws. So the problem is the size and scope of government. The corruption and the cronyism is an important part of it, but there's also the intimidation factor. So Europe is, I think, ground zero for this. Now that DOGE is off and running in the United States, by no means is that war or battle over. It's going to be trench warfare. It's going to go on for years. Right. It's not quickly solved. But we need to start that trench warfare in Europe as well, because you are, as you accurately pointed out, dealing with people that are essentially globalists in global nature. They may have a slight allegiance to some country, but they'll move around. They'll move their LLCs around. They'll move their money in and out of Swiss bank accounts. And so if there's too much transparency in the United States, they're going to go to Europe. If there's too much transparency in Europe, of course, we're a long way from that, they're going to go somewhere else. Maybe they're going to go to Dubai or Moscow or to Beijing to be able to hide what they're doing.
I was listening to your latest episode on Drilldown, and I highly recommend to our listeners listen to Drilldown. It's one of the best podcasts out there. But in your latest episode, you were breaking down the rise of the lobbyists, the rise of K Street in the age of DOGE, and how that dynamic is going to be very interesting, because lobbyists will always exist. It's almost like good and evil. Good and evil will always exist. There's no changing it. And not all lobbyists are bad, but there is a new brand of lobbyists that is rising in the age of DOGE. Expand on that a little bit. That was such a fascinating conversation. It involved, of course, my alma mater, Harvard University, and all of their woes, but that's a different story. The rise of lobbyists, the new lobbyist in the age of DOGE. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, people keep saying, Trump's been in office. Where's the resistance? We're used to Trump's first term in office, seeing protesters in the streets. And my point is, the resistance is there. It's not in the streets. It's on K Street. And what they're doing is they are hiring lobbyists. They're trying to find people that are close to Trump that will take their money to try to get them to divert Trump from his mission. Now, I think they're probably not going to be very successful in that. Trump seems pretty determined, but this is absolutely the route that they're going to take. So of course, Panama. Trump has, said to Panama, look, you're in violation of the agreement that you made with the Carter administration. You've ceded control of parts of the canal to a hostile power, which is China. You're not allowed to do that. You're charging us unfair, exorbitant fees. You're not allowed to do that. So this needs to change, or we are going to take the canal back. Well, Panama's response to that has been to hire lobbyists that are politically connected to Trump world, because they want to try to make this problem go away. You see that Canada's doing the same thing. Harvard University's doing the same thing. Donald Trump spoke on the campaign trail repeatedly about the fact that universities like Harvard have an endowment, I think, of $53 billion upon which they pay zero taxes.
With a B.
And he wants to talk about changing that. The president of Harvard University said when Trump made those comments that this is the kind of stuff that makes him stay up at night. So what they've done is they have hired a Trump-connected lobbyist named Brian Ballard, and they are paying him top dollar because they want this problem to go away. So that's where the resistance is right now. It's not in the streets in the form of protests. It is on K Street. Right. And I think that a lot of these entities are hoping they're going to have more effect by going this route than they did in the previous approach that they took. And I guess time will tell whether they're successful or not.
It certainly will. And it goes to this is a different conversation, but I recently wrote about how Stephen Witkoff, the special envoy to the Middle East, is front and center in the negotiations with Russia. And clearly certain people are kept out of this room. And Witkoff is a different personality. He's a different profile in that he is a billionaire already. He's not privy to some of the things that these lobbyists will be whispering in the ears at some of these lower level officials inside Trump White House even. You have the lure of money, which is such a universal siren song, and one that is often divvied out by K Street, in the form of, you get a fancy board membership after this, or maybe we'll find a spot for your daughter or your son or your wife, $1 million a year. It's nothing. Do this for us and we'll do this for you down the road, wink, wink. And that age, I think, is coming to a close so long as you have guys in place who don't need that money. And unfortunately, it comes with this little bargain of you got to put people in there who actually are immune to money.
Yeah, immune to money and committed to the cause, right? Look, there are a lot of people that worked on the Trump campaign that are true believers in Trump's agenda.
Yes.
So those are people that are less likely to take the money. But you have some other people that, they're true believers. But at the end of the day, they're looking at their career 10 years from now when Donald Trump is no longer president of the United States, when he's off the political stage, and they want to feather their nests. And there are a number, we talk about in the podcast, a number of senior Trump campaign officials who have joined lobbying shops. And I believe that corporations in America, individuals in America do have a right to lobby. We have a constitutional right to petition our government. Yeah. The problem is, I'm not sure that right extends to foreign governments or to Chinese corporations linked to the CCP or to Russian oligarchs, and yet they are signing up some of these Trump-linked lobbyists as well. And my suggestion and advice to the Trump White House is stay focused on your mission. When old friends come calling, realize that they may have certain conflicted interests. And so what they're telling you is driven by that profit motive. It's not driven by a commitment to the cause. So it's the old Reagan line, trust but verify what people are telling you, because you are quite right. You are quite right. They are going to try to go to junior aides to inject some of these ideas into the White House conversation, knowing that if they actually go to the president himself, they're probably not going to get very far.
That's right. Yeah, lobbyists aren't inherently bad, but it is a problem when you've got foreign governments being able to sidle their way into those voices. And then, yes, trust but verify. And then also, to your career's point, follow the money, as always. Peter Schweizer, a pleasure to have you on. Always an illuminating conversation. Looking forward to having you back. And again, everyone, tune into Drilldown. It really is where you find little nuggets like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. Keep up the great work.